There are two things that all of us in this room have in common. And the first is that all of us are born in quite a similar world. Right? All of us are born with external influences, so we have parents and teachers, friends and lovers who in a way exert their influence. Now simultaneously, and this is the second thing that we all have in common, is that all of us are unique. And I don't mean completely different, I mean slightly unique. We all experience, we all feel, we all view the world in our own way. Now what is interesting is these two things, these external influences and the way you are as a unique person, they sometimes create a bit of tension. So there's a little bit of friction because there's certain expectations that you can't always or don't always want to uphold. The result is that some of us, or most of us, always are kind of wondering what is exactly my place in life. Now what I'm going to talk about is exactly this. I'm going to talk about a mindset that might help you with this. And it's the mindset of an entrepreneur, the mindset of somebody who learns by doing. Before I start explaining what the mindset entails, let me first explain why I started believing in this. So we're going to talk about our test subject. Now our test subject, his name is David. David is the co-founder and director of what he believes is quite a successful business school for people with a refugee background. David lives in Amsterdam, has quite a good social life. In terms of characteristics, I'd say David is decently smart. David is fairly driven. David is not bad looking, but he's also not too good looking, which is very, very important. Now David is currently training for the half triathlon, and between you and me, David is a little bit of a show-off. He takes himself a bit seriously sometimes, but he is our test subject. It is what it is. What is relevant is not where David is now. What is relevant is how David got there. So David, and please do keep in mind, this is not a picture of David. This is a random Asian I found on the internet. But we're going to pretend it's David for now. He doesn't know. So when David was young, David wanted to become a doctor. See, he grew up in a very loving family with a very good mom and a dad who was a doctor. Now, he couldn't become a very good mom, so he started to become a doctor, at least wanted to become a doctor. Sadly, he got rejected for medicine school, and what his thought then is he thought, okay, if I cannot help people, I'll just become rich. So he started economics and business with a specialization in tax economics, which is basically tax law and accounting. And don't worry, I'll tell nothing about tax law and accounting. What is more interesting is what happened after his bachelor's, because David was born and raised in the Netherlands, but his family is originally from Indonesia. Now, I read a story before I went to Indonesia, and it was about students from the Netherlands who went to Africa, to Ghana. What they did there is they wanted to build a school as volunteers. When they came back, they wrote a review. And in the review they said that while they were building schools, these lazy African people, they were sleeping, which resulted in quite a bad experience for them. A bit confusing, but what actually happened is that these students were not meant to build schools. They were never trained to build schools. So the walls they built, they were very low quality. And the African people whose children actually had to be in those schools, during the night, rebuilt the walls, evidently making them tired during the day. So when I went to Indonesia, I really did not want to do just volunteer work. I really wanted to do it properly, so I just went there, I just flew, bought a ticket, and asked my family what I could do. I know what you're thinking. David has a very big family in Indonesia. David does have a very big family in Indonesia. These are not my family members. These are actually the children that I taught. So I was working at the university as well as at an orphanage, and I was a business consultant for my family's foundation. Now what I learned there was a little bit confronting because I didn't really fit in. I was very socially isolated because on the outside I was Indonesian, Chinese Indonesian, but Indonesian nonetheless. However, on the inside I was very, very Dutch. So in terms of friends, in terms of maybe management style, the way I worked, I completely misfitted, which is a bit different from here, because here if I walk into a room, people expect somebody who maybe has Asian characteristics, but is very Dutch from the inside. A good thing I learned is that I love teaching. So I really love teaching English, and I continued teaching English when I went back to Amsterdam. Taught at the University of Amsterdam, and David, because we're going to go back to the test subject, David, he also started studying philosophy, again, quite randomly. David enjoyed the intellectual challenge a lot. Again, between you and me, David was never smart enough to actually become a philosopher, but he enjoyed the text nonetheless. And then a year after, he started with his master's in tax economics, which took a very long time. I mean, not as long as the story, but it did take a long time. In fact, he is still finishing it. And that's because he also did a board year at the Tax Law Association while doing an internship at PricewaterhouseCoopers while he started his social enterprise, Refugees Forward. Now let's take a step back. So there's a very, very particular reason that I'm telling you guys this story, because as you might see, and that's also what I saw kind of reflecting back on what was a year with way too many things, is that all the things I did were quite random. Now what I learned is the things that I liked. So I liked teaching, I really liked traveling and being in Indonesia, but what is maybe more important is I also really found out what I did not like. So, for example, my time at PricewaterhouseCoopers on the merger and acquisition department, I really liked the people, but I really disliked the work. I really disliked the work. And that was a company which I really wanted to become partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. My mom's friend worked there, my professor worked there. I thought that is where I'm heading. And when I started doing it, it turned out that it was not meant for me. The reason I'm telling you about the things that I did not like and how I found out about it is because, as I said earlier, all of us inevitably are being influenced. And this is not negative, this is not bad, this is a fact of life, right? We have those friends, we have those parents, we have these expectations, maybe by TV, that lead us to follow a very certain path in our life, given where we're born. I don't think you can overcome that. I do think, however, that given all the possibilities out there in this world, all of us have options for different kinds of life. And they are not completely different. So it doesn't mean living in Kenya and setting up a multi-million-dollar business, but there are slight alterations to the life that you can take. What I think is very important, that is something I really believe in, is that it is key, especially in your younger years, to do as many new and different things all at the same time. Why? Because all of us have an idea of what we like, and all of us have an idea of what we don't like. Now, I think there's a lot of value in doing things that you like, but there's maybe even more value in doing all the things that you don't like. See, the thing is, if you do this, by process of elimination, simply because it is too much, you will end up with the things that you like, and also kind of understanding the person you are. Now, everybody has to do these things in their own tempo, their own pace. It is not about comparing what somebody else is doing at the same time. It's about comparing yourself with what you were doing yesterday. And the reason why I'm saying it is important to do so right now is because if I look at the audience and also maybe the people watching this video, there is usually, in this stage of your life, very little to lose and everything to win. For me personally, I really love being an entrepreneur. And I started this with one of my best friends when, we were living in a student house, we had student loan, we didn't have a wife and children, and I still don't have a wife, maybe a couple of children, but at least the risks were quite limited, and I really encourage you guys to do that. And it's relevant for me to mention that what I'm not saying is that you shouldn't think at all, right? A little bit of thinking is good. It's not about being impulsive. It's not about saying yes to everything. It's about starting and trying new things because you believe you can learn from them. Minimize the downside. I would say it is not a good thing to put all your life savings on red in the casino. That is not being daring. That is being not so smart. A rule of thumb that maybe comes with the mentality of constantly trying new things is don't do to others what you don't want them to do upon you. And then the last one that to me is a bit counterintuitive, I should listen to this, my own advice more often, is know when to quit. See, there's an incredible amount of strength in doing new things, starting new things. I think there's more strength in knowing when to quit. Knowing when that thing you're doing, that experience or that person or that friend is not right for you, because exactly that is what is gonna lead to your acceptance of who you are. And knowing when to quit usually comes from feeling, in my experience, more so than from thinking. Okay, the question that is all on your mind right now is, why listen? A very good question and a very simple answer. There really is not a reason to listen to me. Just try this one thing. If you could all, for a second, for a moment, close your eyes. Everyone, also listening to the video, all of you, close your eyes. And then try to visualize and think about that one thing that you've always been curious about. Always kind of wanted to try, but never did. And it can be very small, something like starting reading new books from different disciplines, starting a dance lesson, starting a music lesson, doing a new sport. But it can also be big, so studying in a different country, living in a different country, setting up a business. If it's big, try to break it down to the smallest step. What do you have to do in order to get to that big thing? Is it opening a savings account? Writing the first letter to your motivational letter? And try to imagine, if you have that step, that first small thing, imagine doing it. And if you've done so, then open your eyes. And as you might have noticed, surprisingly so, not much has happened. And that's okay, because that's the point. I think it's good to have that small step in mind, but the reason why you should listen, maybe, is because there's only one person in this room who has to lead your life, and that is you. Don't you want to find out what you could be doing? What we say about our entrepreneurs in the program, because we set up businesses with people with a refugee background, we say an entrepreneur is somebody who jumps off a cliff and tries to build a plane on his way down. Jumps off a cliff and tries to build a plane on his way down. And my very strong belief is that when it feels scary to jump, that is exactly when you jump. And maybe the first time, jump with a parachute. I mean, for me, I jumped with a parachute. I jumped out of a plane and tried to build a cliff on my way down. But the point is that inevitably, what for me is the case is I really do enjoy being an entrepreneur, but I never believed myself being an entrepreneur. Half a year ago, I was sitting with somebody that I care about a lot. I was sitting with her parents, and I really wanted to make a good impression. Now, I found myself struggling at describing who I was and what I did. So at one point she interrupts me and says, "Mom, Dad, he's an entrepreneur. David, you're an entrepreneur." And that sounded so weird to me, but it is very real at this point. We're now a team of 10 people. We have a budget of 350,000 euros for 4 programs, 2 in Amsterdam and 2 in Rotterdam. The expansion has just started, and we're making very small steps towards Germany. In the last year, we set up 12 businesses with investments totaling more than €250,000. It is super real, but I never would have found out if I would not have jumped. And now I have this super crazy plan, very random, to go to Africa 1 or 2 years from now, bring a little bit of money, start a foundation, start investing in local businesses with people in Africa. And I say 2 years from now because has somebody ever asked you the question, where do you see yourself 2 years from now? Because a good friend of mine, actually a very good friend of mine, once said, if you want to answer the question of where you see yourself 2 years from now, you should go back. You should go back 2 years in time and imagine where you thought you would be 2 years from then, which is today, right? It is quite hard. It is quite hard, and it will be slightly different. For some people, it will be completely different. Try it with 5 years. So 5 years from now means going back 5 years and thinking, where did I think I would be 5 years ago, which is today? The good thing is that even though it's hard for 2, 5, or even 10 years, it is quite easy to do with tomorrow. See, the thing is, yesterday, all of you guys knew that you would be here today. So if yesterday you could think of what you would be doing today, then today you can think about that very small step that you visualized, you can think about doing it tomorrow. The point of my story is, don't think, do. Thank you very much.